Whither can a lover go but to the land of his beloved? And what seeker findeth rest away from his heart's desire?
As you know, we've been talking about wonderful ladies, and you know it's hard for me to leave Juliet Thompson.
Juliet.
Sorry.
I was just saying Juliet.
Juliet, yeah, it's yeah. I feel bad about leaving Juliet and May Maxwell. We haven't talked about May Bowles yet, and we were talking about Laura Getzinger. So I'm not done with the ladies, but today I thought I'd just make a little switch. We're still dealing with Abdu'l-Baha, and I just want to go back about the suffering and the difficult days Abdu'l-Baha had in Akka that we don't quite see through the pilgrim notes, you know, from Laura Getzinger and Juliet Thompson. So I'm going to read to you the last few pages of the diary of Haydar Ali. You know Haydar Ali, right? You all heard of him?
Mírzá Haydar Ali.
Mírzá Haji Haydar Ali. He wrote memoirs that were translated by Hamdullah Faizi, but abridged. So we're not getting exactly the whole story or the whole lot of it, but you know, enough. So I'm going to pick up towards the end, and then as of next week, I'm going to start reading about how he became a Baha'i. And then we'll just go on a little bit because Violetta told me that I should try to avoid as much as I can Wikipedia, because it is not, you know, it is just not quite writers that write it, like Claudia Gold writes, or Mirza Abul Fadel, or, you know, or Mirza Mohajir, his wife. So, and in the whole place in France where I live now, where we live, we have a house here in France, in Chartres, close to a cathedral and a church. The only book I could find hidden somewhere was Stories of the Delight of Hearts. So I'm going to start with the end of it because it's very fascinating. So this man, after being tortured, imprisoned in Sudan and beaten, I mean, I don't know how many times he got, you know, it's horrible. His story is awful, but the guy, you know, just submitted to all these persecutions and ended up his life in the Holy Land. Abdu'l-Baha asked him to come and live there. But he was coming back to Haifa. And let me tell you what he says as he's coming back before he goes to Beirut and goes to Haifa. He came across a certain man by the name of Jamal. Jamal was very famous Baha'i. I guess, you know, in the early days, this covenant breaking business, you know, was big in Persia and in the Holy Land. And of course, we get a taste of it in the US, you know, which is kind of amazing how people were on ego trips, you know. They all wanted to. I have to take this call, please. I'm sorry. This a physician is calling me.
Can you mute yourself?
I don't know how to do that, Violetta.
Okay.
Oui, doctor.
Maybe somebody could say a prayer, like Violetta.
Okay, sure. Let me see if I can find a
Oui, doctor.
Hold on.
Oui.
I'm going to go and choose one of the prayers that have been recently translated.
Oh.
Yep, there's 12 prayers that have recently been translated by Baha'u'llah, and 12 prayers that have been recently translated by Abdu'l-Baha. And one of them has a very amazing sentence in it.
Are those anything you can share, Violetta?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me
No, I mean later and everything.
Yeah, sure. But I'll just share this as well. Hold on, I have to admit someone here. How do I do that? Admit. So these are additional prayers revealed by Baha'u'llah, and I think it's this one. Is the peerless of the Talmud. Not. They're a little bit hard to search because they're not really part of the treasury. I'm going to read this one. He is the peerless. Praise be unto thee, O Lord my God. I beseech thee by thy most exalted name in the tabernacle. He is the all-glorious. Praise be to thee, O my God. Thou didst call me, and I answered thee. Thou didst summon me, and I hastened. O my God, O my God. I testify that this is thy day, which hath been mentioned in thy Sorry. I'm reading the first line of the prayers.
C'est comme ça. Il faut rester jeune, donc c'est le seul moyen de rester jeune, hein, c'est le seul moyen.
Voilà, comme vous dites, c'est une très bonne chose si on y arrive.
Merci, docteur. Merci beaucoup. Je vous en prie. Merci, docteur.
Okay, well, anyway. I will send you the link in chat.
Oh.
Actually, I'll send you the main link. That way you can see both the ones from Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah.
Oh,
All
that's
right.
so beautiful. Beautiful.
They're very beautiful. They're really extraordinary. Really.
All right, you guys. I'm here. I'm back. Did you miss me?
No.
You
But
didn't miss me.
Violetta was helping
Okay,
us.
I'm
not
leaving you
miss you.
since you didn't miss me. I leave you to each other, you guys.
No, stay, please. Oh my God.
It's okay. I'm not young enough like you guys. All right. So while in Caucasia, wherever that is, you can imagine, I learned that Jamal had finally revealed his true self. So I learned that this Jamal, whatever his name, his last full name is, had finally revealed his true self. The friends had begun to realize his burning ambition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, there's no ambitions in the Baha'i world today, I hope. But anyway, we have to understand where we're coming from and how we made it through all these ambitious people. It became known that he had written a letter to Abdu'l-Baha and had demanded three things. That he be appointed as the head of the faith in Persia, that Abdu'l-Baha prepare a special house for him and his son, and that the master rebuke the hands of the cause for their behavior toward him. This letter remained, of course, unanswered. Now, I don't know how this man found out about this story, but I mean, he obviously found out. So Jamal became furious that the Baha'is of Persia did not turn to him and instead remained steadfast in the covenant of Baha'u'llah. So he wrote letters to all the outstanding Baha'is of the country, bewailing the fact that they would not assist him with his plans. Very disappointed. Such deeds of pride and profanity made the Baha'is realize that Jamal never had a particle of faith. Had no particle of faith at all. It's very frightening. So the friends shunned him from then on and would not even walk on the street where he lived. There's an important lesson in the story of Jamal, he says. In the eyes of the friends, he had been a very important person. When he entered the homes of the friends, the bed he slept on and even the chairs he used would be regarded as special objects. The friends used to kiss his hand. He would say to the people, the kissing of hands is forbidden, but for the glory of the cause, I will not prevent the believers from prostrating themselves in front of me and kissing my hand.
What was his name?
However, Jamal, I don't know the full name. We have to sort of dig into it, but, you know, I'll tell you in a second.
Is it Burajurdi?
Sorry?
Burajurdi.
Well, I don't know. Because I haven't read the whole thing. I just started with Jamal because, yeah, probably you're right. Anyway, look it up. Google it. Look at Covenant Breakers. I don't know exactly, but
Oh, who would want to look that up?
So when these people learned that the object of their adoration had become a covenant breaker, they did not even allow him to enter their homes. Now, when Jamal had failed in all his plans, I wrote him a short letter and said, an ignorant person may claim that there is no God, but God keeps the whole universe functioning in perfect order without allowing anyone to break this order. Now reflect on the many schemes you have devised to reach your goal. Reflect also on the fact that all of these plans have been thwarted. None have produced the desired result. Is this not sufficient evidence that your aims and desires are opposed to the order of God, the fashion of the universe? So the friends gave him my note, but I received no reply. Anyway, it's a sad story. So what happened? So our friend, beloved friend, after passing through Caucasia, went to Beirut, and from there made his way to the Holy Land. There were all these ways to get to the Holy Land from Iran. It's very amazing. So the beloved master's first instruction to me was this: do not mention Jamal and his misdeeds. Yes, don't talk about it in the Holy Land. I said, but he has written pamphlets to refute the covenant of God, and they're being spread everywhere. Yes, Abdu'l-Baha said, but he has not signed them. As long as he does not openly proclaim himself as the author of these works, we will not denounce his name and his wrongdoing. We must always conceal the faults of others. Some days after my arrival, Abdu'l-Baha instructed the pilgrims to go to Bahji. The master came by himself on foot and slowly approached the shrine of Baha'u'llah. After tea, he instructed all of us to stand in a circle around the shrine and wait for him to come out. He said that even if we heard curses and foul words from the family of Abdu'l-Baha, who were covenant breakers and who were living right in Bahji, in the mansion, or if we were pelted with stones, we must not pay any attention. Okay? Even if you get pelted by stones. So this actually happened. The covenant breakers who lived in the mansion next to the shrine, those people without God or religion, cursed us and stoned us, even so that day was so wondrous that it is an everlasting memory which, whenever I recall it, enkindles my heart and soul. So it was heartbreaking for us to learn about the evil work of the covenant breakers and the malicious attacks on the beloved master. Master would be attacked from all sides all the time. He would do nothing. These things were never related to any of the friends abroad, but being in the Holy Land, I could see what burdens of sorrow they laid on the master's shoulders every day. These enemies were able to approach the mayor of Akka and bribe him. They asked that he exile Abdu'l-Baha from the city of Akka, thinking that after his departure, the pilgrims would come to them and would consider them as the center of the cause. However, the mayor of Akka was soon dismissed and sent back to his own country. At another time, they offered one of Baha'u'llah's cloaks and a pair of his spectacles to the governor of Haifa. They encouraged him to go and visit Abdu'l-Baha with the cloak on his shoulders and with the glasses of Baha'u'llah. When he came, Abdu'l-Baha realized that he was wearing things which had belonged to his father, and he was deeply grieved. However, he did not say a word and treated the man with the usual extreme courtesy and love. That day passed, but the time came when the same governor was put in prison and in chains. It was Abdu'l-Baha who hastened to help and liberate him. After receiving such unexpected kindness, he begged for forgiveness, saying, "It was not my fault. Your enemies misled me into taking such a grievous step." So those are the kinds of things that happen in Abdu'l-Baha. when he was in Akka, that maybe many of the Western pilgrims didn't see. During the first week of my pilgrimage, early one morning, Mirza Akajan, who had been the amanuensis of Baha'u'llah, you know that he turned crazy and he became a covenant breaker, you know that, after the passing of Baha'u'llah, came in and made funny gestures. He said, Allah Pa, you have an illumined gathering. I left the room, but he followed me to another room and said the same thing. I went to another room and he again followed and said the same thing. I returned to the first room and he came with me again. He said, Allah Pa, you have an illumined gathering. Another believer and I left the house and made our way to a shop in the street. Akajan followed us, hopping up and down and saying the greatest name. We went to one of the shops, which was owned by a believer, and he followed us and stood outside repeating the same thing. A crowd gathered before we had left the shop, but still Aka followed us, hopping and saying the greatest name. This continued until after midday. Hi, Susie. Susie, I see you. I don't know if she is hearing me or not. When the mayor of Akka learned that Akajan had disturbed us and others, he sent soldiers to arrest him. He was taken to the governor's house. The mayor sent the following message to the master. We are sending soldiers to Yemen. The boat is anchored in the port and is ready to sail. If you approve, I will banish this person to Yemen. Abdu'l-Baha's response was immediate. This would not please me, he replied. Mirza Qajan was released, but he never ceased to cause fresh troubles for the master. At one time, he even sent news to the covenant breakers and to their friends that Baha'u'llah had appeared to him in a dream and had promised to help him if he arose at the appointed hour to conquer the Baha'i world and displace the most great branch. Even the covenant breakers once decided to kill him and destroy his body with fire, but Abdu'l-Bahas always protected him. It often happened, he says, that when the master went to the shrine of his father, either riding or on foot, the governor and his officials would follow him to the surrounding area of Bahji. These people would have tea and refreshments, while the master, followed by the friends, would pay homage at the resting place of Baha'u'llah. Many times they observed the master carrying loads of earth in his cloak for the gardens around the shrine. At other times, they observed him carrying a water pot on his shoulders. Twice a year for about 6 years, Abdu'l-Baha would take at least 100 flower pots from the Rizwan garden to Bahji. It was the most exciting procession. Abdu'l-Baha would carry a flower pot on his shoulder, and all the friends and pilgrims would follow him 2 by 2 with flower pots on their shoulders. Mirza Mahmud Kashi would walk in front of the friends and chant prayers in a loud and melodious voice. Once the commander of the army, accompanied by his officers, passed by and saw this spiritual procession. He said to the master, "This is the army of the kingdom, and these are the angels of the exalted realm." I remember one evening, as the commemoration of the ascension of Baha'u'llah approached, the master prepared 200 lanterns. One of these contained 20 candles and each of the others 2 candles. It was about sunset when the same procession of friends carrying these lanterns made their way to Bahji. It happened that we passed a camp of soldiers. The officers stood in their places and paid their respect to the master. We were all in tears. When we reached the shrine, there were 2 rows of worshippers, the friends in one row, and the officers with their soldiers in the other. Everyone was in tears. When the pilgrimage came to an end, the officers encircled the master. They were served tea and refreshments. This was one of the most memorable nights of my life. Every particle in the air and on the earth seemed both to absorb and reflect the glory and majesty of the kingdom of God. The covenant breakers could not bear to see such glorious acts of servitude. They hastened to the Muslim clergy in Akka and expressed their objection to such demonstrations of homage to the resting place of Baha'u'llah. On that evening, Abdu'l-Baha remained awake all night. The friends could not separate themselves from him and gathered in the pilgrim house adjacent to the shrine. Sometimes tea or coffee was served, but the most lamentable part of it was when dawn approached. We all went to the shrine for a second time. To our horror, we discovered that Mírzá Khajan was there and had taken up residence in the shrine. It was evident Abdu'l-Baha's heart was burning with anguish, but he remained silent. He approached the shrine, but chose to sit in the sandy place that surrounded it. About 200 friends sat in a circle with him as we remember the days we had all spent in the presence of the ancient beauty. All of a sudden, Mírzá Khajan dashed out of the shrine barefooted and bareheaded and dressed in a shroud of mourning. He threw dust on his head and gesticulated wildly. He kept repeating, my beloved, where are you? His behavior was so silly that we could not control our laughter. Covenant breakers who had occupied the mansion next door tried repeatedly to take him away, but he kept returning. Again and again, he dashed into our circle, repeating some of the verses of Baha'u'llah. He seemed like a drunken man who could not keep his balance. He kept shouting, running, and reciting parts of the tablets in an irreverent manner. A short while later, we all dispersed. Yet, despite all this, Abdu'l-Baha continued to respect Khajan and protect him and care for him. One of Abdu'l-Baha's major services to the cause of God was to transfer the remains of the Bab from Persia to the Holy Land and to place them in the shrine on the side of Mount Carmel. This act was the fulfillment of the prophecies recorded in the holy books about the glory of Carmel and the surrounding areas. The Bab's wooden casket had been placed in the house of Janab Wazir in Isfahan. It was well hidden in the house and no one knew its location. When the time came, the beloved master issued orders that the body should be transferred from Persia to the Holy Land. Those responsible were advised to travel first to Iraq. They arrived in Baghdad with the sacred cargo, entrusted it to the hands of the friends there, and after visiting the Shia shrines, returned home. My cousin, Hussein Vakil, acted as a custodian of the casket in Baghdad. Further instructions were received that the Bab's remains were to be sent to Beirut, and others were given the honor of this task. Finally, the box containing the divine trust was placed in the hands of the master. You know, when we read from, I forget, Lua Getzinger or Julie Thompson, it says that the casket stayed in the room of the greatest holy leaf for a while. Let us look back for a moment to the early days when the master took the first steps to purchase the land on Mount Carmel, where Baha'u'llah had indicated the tomb of the Bab should stand. When the covenant breakers learned that he intended to purchase that land, their malicious opposition was aroused. They approached the owner of the land and persuaded him not to sell. They assured him that in a short time, the land would be worth 10 times the value. They instigated others to write letters to the government claiming possession of all the land of Mount Carmel. Therefore, it took the master more than 6 months of persistent effort to purchase the desired piece of land. But even so, that land was situated like an island in the midst of other land, which belonged to other people. There was no access to it. The master was so weighed down with troubles that he decided not to pursue the matter. During his silence, the covenant breakers became more active than ever, but the master left everything in the hands of God. Abdu'l-Baha says that all the time. You get problems? Just take it easy. Just sit with God, it's in your hands. Time passed, and the covenant breakers were happy because they thought that they had been completely successful. One day, a person who owned land adjacent to the land for the shrine of his own free will sought the presence of Abdu'l-Baha. When he met with the master, he told him of all the intrigues of the enemies of the cause. He expressed his deep regrets, begged forgiveness of Abdu'l-Baha, and declared his readiness to sell whatever land was desired. The master immediately began making plans for the construction of the Bab's tomb. When the enemies learned of these efforts, they wrote letters to the Ottoman court reporting Abdu'l-Baha was planning to build a huge fortress on the side of Mount Carmel. They asserted that this fort would be a great danger to the safety of the empire. The government immediately ordered all work on the construction of the shrine to cease. Such orders were given not once, but several times. The master appealed the case to a government committee of investigation, which eventually gave permission for the construction to continue. Some of the friends lost their patience and suggested to the master, "Why don't you explain the whole situation to the government?" "Impossible," said the master. "How can I explain these things to anyone? I would have to complain against the members of my own family. Then what would people say? They would surely say that the great prophet had come for the purpose of bringing all the people to unity, but the members of his own family are now fighting among themselves. This fatal disease must be fought with patience and forgiveness. We must supplicate the Lord so that he, in his unlimited bounty, may forgive our sins, accept our prayers of repentance, and awaken all men to the light of true understanding." Abdu'l-Baha undertook to prepare a suitable depository for the priceless remains of the Bab. He instructed the friends of Rangoon, Burma, to make a hardwood coffin and a marble sarcophagus. The marble was to be unique and of brilliant luster. When these were prepared, the master instructed that the top and sides of the sarcophagus were to be adorned with the greatest name. The designs were prepared in exquisite penmanship by the calligrapher Mishk al-Qalam. When the friends of Burma were ready to ship their work to Akka, they brought 2 carts and walked the whole distance to the seashore, pulling the carts and chanting along the way. Their procession was joined by many others. Then they placed their precious trust in a mosque, and crowds of people were attracted by the jubilation. They inquired about the reason for such joyous ceremonies. One of the friends took the floor and told them of the life of the Bab, his martyrdom, and his burial in Mount Carmel. Many hearts were touched, and many entered the faith and joined the friends in serving the cause in Burma. So you can imagine, by just reading this, the life of the master, in the middle of this, people were writing to him hundreds of letters, and he had to correspond with the whole world and take care of mausoleum, take care of the remains of the Bab and the covenant breakers and the shrine of Baha'u'llah. There was not a moment's rest for the master. At times, he seemed like a man on a ship in the middle of a tempestuous ocean. But this would never cause Abdu'l-Baha to lose heart. He never appeared despondent or hopeless. That was not the master. Out of the darkness, he would emerge time and again with a new plan and a new victory. I guess we're talking about Abdu'l-Baha, who is our example, right? That's the stories of Abdu'l-Baha. It's about us understanding how to be. Basically, that's what we have to learn. This is all for us to pick up on some things and see how we can be like him. Not even having finished the shrine, he called on the friends to raise the first Baha'i house of worship in the heart of Asia. In Ishkabad, Russia, a cousin of the Bab, Janabi Afnan, was appointed by Abdu'l-Baha to go to Ishkabad from his native town of Yazd to oversee the construction of the temple. Upon his arrival, the Consul General of Iran, the governor of the province, merchants, and other notables joined the Baha'is in receiving their honored guest. The governor expressed joy and gratitude that the first Baha'i house of worship would be erected under his dominion. Preparations for construction were soon underway. Once the plans had been approved, the friends immediately set to work to build the temple. The cornerstone was laid in place by a representative of the Tsar himself. Most of the temple was completed within 4 years. This reminds us that Abdu'l-Baha went to the States, of course, and he laid the cornerstone for the where the Wilmette Baha'i temple in Wilmette. At this time, Abdu'l-Baha instructed me to take a trip to Caucasia and Ishqabad. I had the honor of visiting Janabi Afnan, and being in his presence, he was the embodiment of perfection and sanctity. So he spent all his money to carry this mission conferred upon him by the master. He sacrificed most of his fortune to erect the house of worship. He would pay only scant attention to his personal needs. He remained rich, and his wealth would always meet all his needs. The time came when I decided to bid farewell to the friends in Ishqabad and travel to Mashhad. There I met Mahmoud Zarqani. We shared the house together and worked together for the faith. We associated with all classes of people, and before long our teaching activities became so well known that people came to us with all kinds of problems which had nothing to do with the faith. Whoever came in, by the grace of God, returned home happy and contented. See, then we get into this thing of how you help people. This is the new message of the House of Justice, social, participating in the life of society, helping people. I don't know. Maybe this is examples, and this is what they did. So people came with problems that had nothing to do with the faith. So mostly, I guess, health and money problems. And they all returned home happy and contented. Our teaching was so successful that some people feared that within 1 year, all the important people of the city would become Baha'is. All the important people. Baha'i teachers from other areas came to help with this effort. This is like going to be soon entry by troops, mass conversion. Let's talk about Mashhad in Iran. Meetings were held all over the city. The believers formed committees to feed the poor and advance the public welfare. Here again. All right? What he's saying makes sense. Abdu'l-Baha asked him to write. So this is what he wrote. We were still in Khurasan when we heard of the great upheaval in Yazd. This news caused uneasiness among the new believers in Mashhad. The disturbances lasted for more than 2 months, during which 195 believers were mercilessly put to death. Voilà. They had that and that. The governor of the province, instead of protecting the people under his care, ruthlessly helped the bloodthirsty mobs. Baha'is were killed, their houses destroyed, and their possessions plundered and confiscated. Now, this is probably not the first or the last time. During these disorders, a well-known maidservant of the cause, Alawiye Khanum, reached the city of Yazd. As soon as she set foot in the town, she was arrested and made to undergo all kinds of persecutions. Eventually, the chief of police took her under his protection and gave her some advice. Won't you just speak one word of denial and rid yourself of all this suffering? Under no circumstances, she replied, that one word would deprive me of all the eternal bounties of God. I would gladly sacrifice this ephemeral life for the supremacy of the name of God. The governor heard about her imprisonment and issued an order that she should be sent to Abadi. During all these disturbances, no one in the whole of Iran, or in the neighboring countries would listen to the cries of the Baha'is for justice. The beloved friends were at the mercy of the irresponsible mobs who were encouraged by the bloodthirsty clergy and the most ignorant of governors. The only one who stretched forth his hand to assist the wronged and sorrow-stricken victims was the Master, who was himself a prisoner, incarcerated in the city of Akka and surrounded by the most despicable enemies. He looked after the urgent needs of the children and youth, the old men and women who were caught in the fire of persecution. The covenant breakers conspired against Abdu'l-Baha. They formed groups against him and like vipers began to move in different directions. The groups approached the government, the governor, the secret police, the outstanding ulamas, and any other person they could influence in Palestine, Syria, or Turkey. They did everything they could to arouse the officials against Abdu'l-Baha. The Master remained calm and serene. He never approached the authorities. He suffered in silence. He prayed fervently for his enemies that they might open their eyes and cease committing iniquities against the innocent band of believers in Akka. Whenever Abdu'l-Baha received any gift, he would immediately send it to his family, who had violated the covenant of God. Far from being grateful, they in turn would offer these gifts to the governor, the commander of the army, or others in an effort to convince them to take steps against Abdu'l-Baha. Their aim was to have the Master exiled to a distant and unknown place. If this could be accomplished, they believed that since they would be in possession of the holy shrines, because they would take possession of the shrines, all the believers would greatly regard them as the center of the faith. And that was the plan. The most active of the covenant breakers was Hajj Majd al-Din, the cousin of the Master. He was the center of abominable deeds. He would sneer at the pilgrims who visit Abdu'l-Baha and declare, "You're only here for a few days, but soon you will leave and everything will fall into our hands. All will seek shelter under our shadow." Abdu'l-Baha liked to visit the resting place of his father every week, but in order to appease the enemy, he decided to remain in Akka. When he desired to visit Bahji, he would go up to the roof of his house, face the shrine of Baha'u'llah, and pray. He would sometimes chant the tablet of visitation in a loud voice. We would hear him chanting, and we were indeed heartbroken. This situation continued for 2 years. The result of all the complaints and mischief of the covenant breakers was an upheaval of debris which buried everyone. An order came from the officials that all members of the family were to live in Akka, and no one was to step outside of the city. The Master was already residing in Akka, so it was the covenant breakers living in Bahji who were now forced to return to Akka and to live there. They were all taken to the city and placed under restriction. The officials soon realized that it was Muhammad Ali and Majd al-Din who had caused all the trouble, but Abdu'l-Baha intervened on their behalf and requested the authorities to allow them to return to Bahji. Just imagine. No, it's okay. Let him go back. So one governor came to power who was the essence of courtesy and faith. He loved Abdu'l-Baha to the point of worship. In addition, Badri Beg, the military commander, was very friendly to the Master. When the enemies of the cause saw this state of affairs, they became furious and joined all their forces to bring about the downfall of Abdu'l-Baha. They decided to send false reports containing the most alarming accusations to the Ottoman court. They claimed that the governor, as well as the military commander and his officers, had all become the servants of Abdu'l-Baha. They were accused of training 30,000 soldiers, of raising a flag of rebellion inscribed with the greatest name, and of convincing the Arab tribes of the desert to join in the rebellion. The covenant breakers claimed Abdu'l-Baha had proclaimed himself to be the return of Christ, as such, claimed sovereignty over all the nations of the world and regarded all rulers as his vassals. Abdu'l-Baha sent a single sentence in reply to these accusations. He said, "Listen to the reports, but ask the accusers to present their evidence and their witnesses." See, so this logic Baha'u'llah used and the Baha used, and it's like, well, it's fine, take us to court, evidence, witnesses, no problem. But the court accepted the reports without investigation. The reason for this was that the accusing letters had been written, signed and sealed by the brothers and cousins of Abdu'l-Baha. So it's his family. So we accept the accusations. Before long, the thick clouds of confusion and persecution again covered the horizon of Akka. The friends and supporters of the master were unexpectedly dismissed from their posts. When the noble governor came to the master to bid him farewell, Abdu'l-Baha assured him that the governor would return to a high position in the future. The military commander was also shorn of his rank, but he remained happy and content that he had served Abdu'l-Baha. New officials were placed in charge of the telegraph and post offices. All letters were opened and read, and every telegram was scrutinized. Secret police were everywhere. People were ordered to stay at home. In the evening, the enemies of the faith were jubilant. The master remained alone. He even asked the friends to leave Akka and to disperse in different directions. Danger threatened him from all sides, yet he retained his tranquility and fortitude. He began to repair the house in which he lived and to plant grapevines in his small garden. Letters of accusation regularly found their way to the court of the Sultan of Constantinople. Although such reports should have been investigated, not even one of the believers was consulted. All of the reports were taken to be true, and a committee of 4 men was dispatched to Akka to confirm the charges. So anyway, so the point is that this came to nothing, because we know what happened in Turkey. They came and they were corrupted by the family of Abdu'l-Baha, but he never approached them, never approached the committee. This enraged them. In order to show their contempt for the master, they sent a summons for Abbas to appear before them. Upon receiving the order, Abdu'l-Baha went to the place where the committee was holding its meetings. The room was crowded with enemies of the faith. The master said, "I'm happy and proud that you refer to me simply as Abbas. This is the way that the prophets of God are addressed. Who has heard of Moses Pasha or Jesus Big or Muhammad Khan? They are called simply Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad." The officials were astounded by this audacious statement. One of them inquired, "We have heard that you have books in your house which are dangerous to the public welfare." He says, "No such books are ever in my possession. But there are witnesses who have testified to this fact." Abdu'l-Baha said, "I told you that I do not have such writings in my house, and that's all." He then left the room. The committee was amazed at the courage of this man whom they believed to be completely at their mercy. So anyway, that was the end of it. So these members of the committee boarded the ship to return to Constantinople. They were happy. They were impatient to reach the Sultan's court and relate the results of their investigation. They saw this as an opportunity to present themselves as the protectors of the throne and to defenders of the empire. One of them expected that he was going to get rewarded. But before the committee could reach its destination and present its libellous report, the foundations of the Ottoman Empire began to crumble and the realm thrown into confusion. I don't know, this is events, there was the revolution of Young Turks. I mean, I don't know, all the problems that happened in Turkey, and that was basically the end. They had no, this is it gets to be very political, this whole situation about Abdu'l-Baha escaped basically being condemned to death and being exiled. So the committee and all its reports were totally ignored. So all the evil efforts of these corrupt officials were brought to naught. So as the author of this memoir says, can we not see the hand of God operating in the whole universe? Now, we're coming down to the end of this memoir. Now, as I told you, I just reading the last few pages because it deals with Abdu'l-Baha. Hopefully, unless something else happens, next week I'll just come back and begin to tell his story, how he became a Baha'i, because it's all our Zoom is about teaching, about how one declares his faith and how one teaches. Of course, teaching the time, you pay with your life. He was in prison for so many years everywhere, including in Sudan. Now he says, now at the end of my life, all I possess is ignorance and weaknesses and unawareness and heedlessness and neglect and valuelessness and worthlessness and uselessness and poverty and shamelessness and destitution and powerlessness and disobedience and wrongdoing and sin and darkness and worldliness and transience and selfishness and corrupt desire. He's close to 90 years old. Any wrongdoing or sin which can be imagined is mine. So I do not write this from a sense of humility. This is only truth and honesty and reality. The bounties of God are obvious and apparent. 50 years ago in Adrianople, I attained the presence of that Son of Truth before whom all others must prostrate themselves. From that time, every breath I have taken, I have tried to conform to his will, and every step I have taken, I have directed toward him. I do not know if my services were acceptable to him, but his compassion and love and generosity have always surrounded me. The more I transgressed, the more he concealed my faults. The more I erred, the more generous he was. He saved me from the greatest difficulties and from the calamity of self. And this is the time of Baha'u'llah. Now he is in Haifa. A true Baha'i I am not. Oh God, assist me and make my efforts fruitful. Assist the Master, this book I have written by his order. But I'm so old and decrepit that many times while I'm writing, I have forgotten the order of my words and lost my train of thought. When this happened, I would have to get up and leave my work, but whenever I started to write again, my pen would carry on the story. This humble servant has never entered any school and is unaware of the rules of grammar and style. I beseech all the Baha'is, may my soul be sacrificed for them to beg for my forgiveness at the holy threshold, as I see nothing in myself but wrongdoing, and nothing among the servants of God but forgiveness and concealment. With thanks to God, the Lord of the worlds. And this was signed May 17th, 1912. Now, just the final word. This epilogue is written by Mr. Faizi. The author of these memoirs, Hájí Mírzá Haydar Alí, known as the Angel of Carmel by the Baha'is of the West, was indeed close to the heart of Abdu'l-Baha. During his journeys to America, the Master sent some of his most tender messages to this veteran soldier of the cause. In one of them, he describes the meetings which were held, the banquets, the newly recruited believers, and after each comment he repeats, I miss you very much. So what finally happened to Haydar Ali? There were many requests from all over the Baha'i world for him to visit. Now Abdu'l-Baha sent many people, he sent Mirza al-Fadil and the other Baha'is to help in the West, but he didn't send him. He said, but as he advanced in years, the Master did not approve his going abroad. He would often wrap Haydar Ali in his cloak and lovingly repeat, Haji is ours. Haji is ours. He was asked by the Master to teach the children of his household. All the grandsons of Abdu'l-Baha attended his classes. Shoki Effendi, who was later to become the guardian of the faith, was among his students. Haydar Ali recognized the station even at this early age. Whenever the young Shoki Effendi would enter the class, Hájí Mírzá Haydar Ali would rise in respect to his student. He often whispered in his ear, Sufficient to you is the school of the master. In many of the group pictures which were taken at the pilgrim house during the time of Abdu'l-Baha, the two old men can be seen standing on opposite sides of the group. One was Hájí Mírzá Haydar Alí, the other Mullah Abu Tahib, a veteran believer from Caucasia. Haydar Ali and Abu Talib would often exchange jokes with one another in Haifa to the delight of all their friends. These two veteran believers, soldiers in the twilight of their lives, were still so lively that they could make everyone laugh. When Haydar Ali became ill and bedridden, the beloved master would go to his room and inquire about his health and well-being. One day he asked him, "How do you sleep at night?" "Not very well," the Haji replied. Mullah Abu Talib immediately interrupted and said, "He's wrong. He snores all night long." And the master and the friends laughed most heartily. Abdu'l-Baha commanded that two of the believers should help Hájí Mírzá Haydar Ali walk in the sunshine every morning. Once his cousin Vakil took him by the arm to help him walk. He asked the Haji, "What else do you desire? The beloved master comes to see you every day and grants you the strength to carry the burden of life." Haydar Ali smiled and said, "If you really love me, pray that I will die steadfast in the covenant." And before he finished the sentence, the cousin interrupted and exclaimed, "What do you mean, cousin? You are almost 90 years old and so much loved and respected by the master." "Yes, that is true," was the reply, "but you cannot imagine how very cunning and insidious the self can be. It accompanies a man to the edge of the grave. The only thing that protects us from its deadly grasp is the divine assistance, which is granted through prayer." The next day, when the master visited the Haji, he assured Haydar Ali, saying, "You will sleep well, you will sleep well." And that's it, dear friends. This is it. This is the end of it. Now, next week, this is France. Next week I should be in Africa. So if I make it, if I test negative again, this is the fourth test I take. It's all negative so far. 4 negatives, maybe another 5th negative, hopefully. Then we'll read how this man became a Baha'i, because it's really astounding. He came from Isfahan. His father was a really religious man, and he saw what happened to the Baha'is, how they were being persecuted, just how one becomes a Baha'i is very fascinating, This, of course, these things don't happen again, this is not what happens today, but again, it's good to be exposed to that. So we'll take a break from the wonderful ladies we've been visiting. I'm sorry that I have to come back to a man. I know that the ladies that are listening to me are probably upset. But listen, we're going to come back to May, Maxwell, and others because I haven't finished yet. And welcome to Alex, and welcome to Susie again, and to Madame Abbasi, and all these wonderful people again, and Daniel.